International investors, well, they breathed a sigh of relief. That's after President Putin dismissed the option of controlling foreign currency flows across the Russian borders. This rumour had been fuelled by the new weakness of the Russian ruble against the dollar and the levels of capital outflow, which are expected to exceed $100 billion in 2014. Well, I'm now joined by Ben Aris from Business New Europe to discuss this topic in detail now. So, Ben, no capital controls. Can I just gauge your reaction on this one, please?
It's a good thing. I mean, investors, there was a report by Bloomberg at the start of the week suggesting that the central bank was talking about introducing capital controls, and investors got seriously freaked out. I mean, you have to bear in mind that Russia, of all the emerging markets, is the only one that has a totally open current account that you can transfer money in and out without any restriction, from day to day. And that's very important for investors, because if they make money, they want to be sure that they take it home. I think the capital controls were, if they were to introduce them, it's usually a measure of last resort when your hard currency reserves are running out to nothing and you're desperate for every dollar in order to pay for imports. And Russia is far, far away from that position. It has more than $450 billion. I think it's the third largest reserves of currency in the world. And so there's no need for capital controls.
So the central bank is juggling a weak currency and stubbornly high inflation, which has reached a 3-year high now.
It does, because it gives, it also acts as a cushion in so much as, if there's shocks or economic pain, then the ruble will devalue, as it has been. I mean, it's lost some 20% of its value over the course of this year. And what that does is it makes Russian products cheaper, it makes it easier to export, you can earn more revenue. The oil companies in particular do extremely well out of that because their costs are in rubles, but their revenue are in dollars. And so then that acts as a counterbalancing measure which will pick the economy up. And so it means that Russia can absorb this pain much more easily than it could in the past. I mean, in the past we had a fixed exchange rate, and so when financial crises come, they're made that much worse by the fixed exchange rate. And now we have this measure of flexibility, which will actually make things, even though we're feeling some economic pain, the economy will self-adjust by devaluing the ruble, which it's been doing.
Ben, I want to talk about the central banks. We've got two main tasks at the moment, as I understand it. So we've got a weak currency. You spoke about some positives. It's also got this high inflation as well. We're at about a 3-year high. How does it balance the books with these two huge challenges?
Well, unfortunately, the central bank is caught between the proverbial rock and a hard place. I mean, on the one hand, the high inflation argues that you raise interest rates in order to bring inflation down, make people invest more. On the other hand, the economic growth is so poor that argues for cutting inflation interest rates in order to boost economic growth. And the problem is it's got to do both things at once. It's got to cut rates and raise rates. And so they're trying to sort of manage their way between these two. The problem with the inflation is that, as Nabulina, the governor, was saying yesterday at the conference, is that the inflation has been driven by non-monetary factors. That's to say, the usual things you do to bring inflation down is attached to monetary policy, how many rubles you print, and none of those things are actually pushing inflation up. It's things like food prices, which are outside the control of the central bank. So she has a very hard job of trying to manage this inflation because she doesn't actually have any tools to deal with it. So this is a wider problem of structural reform, of lifting the sanctions, of ending the food bans on European food, of investing into agriculture, which the government intends to do. But those things will really only start to kick in and make a difference a couple of years down the road. So in the meantime, they're going to have to muddle through the best they can.
Ben Aris, Business New Europe magazine. Thank you for talking to us, the editor right there on the streets of Moscow. Rather noisy, but very autumnal. So thank you.